Agastya. The Pandavas, when they were exiled, started on a pilgrimage to holy places, acquainting themselves with the stories and traditions relating to each place. The story of Agastya was one such. Agastya, it is said, once saw some ancestral spirits dangling head down and asked them who they were and how they came to be in their unpleasant plight. They replied, "Dear child, we are your ancestors. If you do not discharge your debt by marrying and begetting progeny, there will be no one after you to offer us oblations. We have therefore resorted to this austerity in order to persuade you to save us from this peril." When Agastya heard this, he decided to marry. Around the same time, the king of the country of Vidarbha was childless and so careworn. He appealed to Agastya to help him and sought his blessing. In granting the king the boon, Agastya announced that the king would be the father of a beautiful girl who, he stipulated, should be given to Agastya himself in marriage. Soon after this, the queen gave birth to a baby girl who was named Lopamudra. She grew with years into a maiden of rare beauty and charm that she became celebrated in the Kshatriya world. But no prince dare woo her out of fear of sage Agastya. Later, the sage Agastya came to Vidarbha country and demanded the hand of the king's daughter. The king was reluctant to give the delicately nurtured princess in marriage to a sage leading a primitive life of a forester. But he also feared the anger of the mighty sage if he said no, and was plunged in sorrow. Lopamudra, greatly concerned, discovered the cause of her parents' distress and expressed her readiness, nay, her desire to marry the sage. The king was relieved, and the marriage was celebrated in due course. When the princess set out to accompany the sage, he bade her to give up her costly garments and valuable jewels. Without a hesitation, Lopamudra distributed her priceless jewels and garments amongst her companions and attendants, and donning herself in deer skins and garments of bark, she joyfully accompanied the sage. During the time after their marriage, Lopamudra and Agastya spent time in tapas and meditation at Gangadhwara. A strong and abiding love sprang up between them. For conjugal life, Lopamudra's modesty shrank from the lack of privacy in the forest hermitage. One day, with blushing humility, she expressed her desire to her husband. She said, "My desire is that I may have the royal bedding and the beautiful robes and the valuable jewels I had when I was at my father's place, and you too may have splendid garments and ornaments, and then we shall enjoy life to our heart's content." Agastya smilingly replied, "I have neither the wealth nor the facilities to provide what you want. Are we not beggars living in this forest?" But Lopamudra knew her lord's yogic power and said, "Lord, you are all powerful by the strength of your austerities. You can get the wealth of the world in a moment if you but will." Agastya said that no doubt that was so, but if he spent his austerities in gaining things of little value as material riches, they would soon dwindle to nothing. She replied, "I do not wish that. What I wish is that you should earn a living in the ordinary way sufficient enough for us to live in ease and comfort." Agastya agreed and set out as an ordinary Brahmana to various kingdoms. Agastya visited a king who was reputed to be very wealthy. The sage told the king, "I come in quest of wealth. Give me what I seek without causing any loss or injuries to others." The king presented a true picture of the income and the expenditure of the state, and told him he was free to take what he deemed fit. The sage found from the accounts that there was no balance left. The expenditure of the state turned out always to be at least equal to its income. This seems to have been the case in ancient times too. Seeing this, Agastya thought, to accept any gift from this king will be a hardship to the citizens, so I shall seek elsewhere. The sage was about to leave, saying so to the king. The king said that he would accompany him, and both of them went to another state where they found the same state of affairs. Vyasa, the author of the Mahabharata, thus lays down the maxims of a state, and that a king should not tax his citizens more than necessary for the rightful public expenditure, and that if one accepts as gift anything from the public revenues, one adds to the burden of the subjects to that extent. Agastya then thought of the wicked Asura Ilvala and decided to try his luck. It was known in all the countries that Ilvala had a hoard of wealth gained by ill measures. Ilvala and his brother Vatapi cherished an impeccable hatred towards Brahmanas. They had a curious plan for killing them. Ilvala would, with effective hospitality, invite a Brahmana to a feast. By the power of his magic, his brother Vatapi would be turned into a goat. He would kill this pseudo-goat for food and serve its meat to the unassuming guest. In those days, the Brahmanas would eat meat if they received it as food. The feast over, Ilvala would invoke his brother Vatapi to come out, for he had the art of bringing back to life those whom he had killed. And Vatapi, who as the food had entered the vitals of the unlucky guest, would spring up and tear out whole and sound with fiendish laughter, of course killing the guest in doing so. In this manner many a Brahmanas had died. Ilvala was very happy when he heard that sage Agastya was in the neighbourhood, since he felt that there was a good Brahmana delivered into his hands. So he welcomed him and prepared the usual feast. The sage heartily ate Vatapi, who was transformed into a goat, and it only remained for Ilvala to call out his brother for the rendering scene. And as usual, Ilvala repeated the magic words and shouted, "Vatapi, come out!" Agastya smiled and, gently rubbing his stomach, said, "Vatapi jirno bhava." Vatapi, be digested in my stomach for the peace and good of the world. Ilvala shouted again and again in frantic fear, but there was no response from Vatapi. And then the sage explained the reason. Vatapi had been digested. The trick had been tried once too often. The Asura bowed to Agastya and surrendered to him the riches he sought. Thus was the sage able to satisfy Lopamudra's desire. Agastya asked her what she would prefer, 10 ordinary good sons, or one super good son with the strength of 10. Lopamudra replied she would like to have one exceptionally virtuous and learned son. The story goes that she was blessed with such a gifted son. When Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati's marriage took place, the entire world came to see them get married. The weight of all beings in the northern Himalayas caused the earth's balance to tilt and become unstable. Lord Shiva then requested that sage Agastya go to the south and keep the earth balanced at the other end. There is yet another story of the Vindhya mountain range tied to sage Agastya. Once the Vindhyas grew jealous of the Meru mountain and tried to grow in stature, obstructing the sun, the moon, and the planets. Unable to prevent this danger, the gods sought aid from Agastya. The sage went to the Vindhya mountain and said, O best of mountains, stop your growing till I cross you on my way to the south and return north again. After my return, you can grow as you like. Wait till then. Since the Vindhya mountains respected Agastya, it bowed down low to his request. Agastya crossed over, but did not return north at all, and settled in the south. And so the Vindhyas remained arrested in growth to this day. Such is the story narrated in the Mahabharata.